What if I told you that death isn't the end, but just another beginning? What I'm about to reveal will challenge everything you thought you knew about life, death, and the mysteries that connect us across time. The story you're about to hear involves one of the most tragic days in American history, September 11th, 2001, and a soul's journey that defies all logical explanation. Stay until the very end, because what I'm going to show you will completely transform your understanding of reincarnation and the spiritual connections that bind us. If you leave now, you'll miss the most incredible piece of this puzzle that will shake you to your core. If you're finding this content intriguing, hit that subscribe button and activate the notification bell for more mind-blowing videos like this one. And if you could, please leave a like. It really helps me bring more incredible content like this to you. September 11th, 2001, a day that forever changed the world. Among the 2,977 souls who perished in the World Trade Center attacks was Michael Rodriguez, a 34-year-old financial analyst working on the 97th floor of the North Tower. Michael was known for his gentle spirit, his love for his family, and his unwavering dedication to helping others. He had called his wife that morning, just minutes before the first plane hit, telling her he loved her and that he'd see her soon. Those were the last words she would ever hear from him. But death, as we're about to discover, was not Michael's final chapter. What happened next challenges every scientific principle we hold dear and opens doorways to realms we barely comprehend. The story I'm about to tell you has been meticulously documented, investigated by renowned paranormal researchers, and verified through methods that will leave even the most skeptical minds questioning everything they believe about the nature of existence itself. 3 years after that devastating September morning, in a small town in Ohio, a child was born who would carry within him memories that belonged to another life, another time, another soul. James Patterson came into this world on September 11th, 2004, exactly 3 years to the day after Michael Rodriguez drew his last breath in Tower 1. But the synchronicities were only just beginning to unfold. From the moment James could speak, he began describing details about a life that wasn't his own. At the age of 2, he would wake up screaming in the middle of the night, calling out names that his parents had never heard before. Sarah, David, Jennifer, names that meant nothing to the Patterson family, but would later prove to be the names of Michael Rodriguez's closest colleagues, who had also perished that day. James would draw pictures that sent chills down his parents' spines. Dark towers reaching toward the sky, airplanes flying into buildings, people falling through clouds of smoke and debris. These weren't the typical drawings of a toddler fascinated by airplanes or tall buildings. These were detailed, haunting depictions of scenes that a child born 3 years after the attacks should have no knowledge of, especially considering his parents had been careful never to expose him to footage or images from that tragic day. The most disturbing aspect of James's behavior wasn't just the memories he claimed to have, but the emotional weight he carried with them. This little boy would sob uncontrollably when talking about his other mommy and his work friends who went to heaven. He would describe the feeling of smoke burning his lungs, the terror of being trapped in a building that was collapsing around him, and the desperate phone calls he made in his final moments. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a child psychologist specializing in cases of claimed past life memories, was brought in to evaluate James when he was 4 years old. What she discovered during her sessions would challenge every assumption she had about the human consciousness and the possibility of souls carrying forward experiences from previous incarnations. During their first meeting, James looked at Dr. Vasquez with eyes that seemed far too old for a small face and said, "I used to work in a very tall building in New York. I helped people with their money. There was a loud noise, and then everything got very hot and scary. I tried to call my wife, but the phone stopped working." Dr. Vasquez began documenting every detail James shared, cross-referencing his statements with historical records from September 11th. The accuracy of his descriptions was unsettling. He knew about the layout of floors in the North Tower that had never been made public. He described the smell of jet fuel, the sound of the building's structure groaning under stress, and the specific stairwell where many people had tried to escape. But perhaps the most compelling evidence came when James was shown photographs of World Trade Center employees who had died that day. Without hesitation, he pointed to Michael Rodriguez's picture and said, "That's me. That's what I used to look like." The photograph had been mixed in with dozens of others, and James had never seen it before. The odds of a random selection were astronomical. What makes this story even more extraordinary is the physical evidence that began manifesting as James grew older. He developed an inexplicable fear of tall buildings and airplanes, but more remarkably, he began showing knowledge and skills that he had never been taught. By age 6, James was performing mathematical calculations that were far beyond his grade level, specifically the type of financial analysis that had been Michael Rodriguez's specialty. James would sit at a small desk and work out complex equations involving investment portfolios and market trends, concepts that most adults struggle to understand. When his parents asked where he learned these things, he would simply say, "I remember from before, when I helped people with their money." The Patterson family decided to take James to New York City when he turned 7, hoping that seeing the rebuilt site might provide some closure or answers to the mysteries surrounding their son. The moment they arrived at Ground Zero, James's behavior changed dramatically. He became quiet, almost reverent, and began walking with purpose toward specific locations around the memorial. He led them to the exact spot where the North Tower had stood and placed a small hand on the memorial wall. Tears streamed down his face as he whispered names: Michael Rodriguez, Sarah Chun, David Goldman, Jennifer Martinez. These were the names he had been calling out in his nightmares for years, and research later confirmed that all of these individuals had worked on the same floor as Michael Rodriguez and had died together that morning. James then did something that left his parents and several witnesses speechless. He began reciting the exact words from a final voicemail that Michael Rodriguez had left for his wife before the tower collapsed. These words had never been made public, were known only to Michael's widow and the FBI investigators who had recovered the message from the phone company servers. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this incredible story so far. Have you ever experienced something that made you question the boundaries between life and death? Share your opinion in the comments below. I love reading and responding to your experiences. The investigation into James's claims took on new urgency when Michael Rodriguez's widow, Maria, agreed to meet with the boy who claimed to be her deceased husband's reincarnated soul. The meeting was arranged through Dr. Vasquez and took place in a neutral location, with multiple witnesses present to document every interaction. When 7-year-old James saw Maria for the first time, he ran directly to her and embraced her legs, looking up with tears in his eyes and saying, "I'm sorry I couldn't come home. I'm sorry I left you alone." Maria later testified that these were words that echoed the exact sentiment Michael had expressed in their final phone conversation. A conversation that James should have had no knowledge of. But the most convincing proof came when James began sharing intimate details about Michael and Maria's life together. He knew about their secret anniversary tradition of eating Chinese takeout from a specific restaurant that had been special to them since their first date. He knew about the hidden key they kept under a fake rock in their garden. He knew about Maria's scar from a childhood accident that she kept concealed even from close friends. James described their apartment with stunning accuracy, down to the specific placement of furniture and the color of curtains in their bedroom. He knew about Michael's habit of leaving love notes in Maria's coffee mug before leaving for work each morning. He even knew about their private jokes and the pet names they had for each other, intimate details that had never been shared with anyone outside their marriage. The scientific community was divided on how to interpret James's case. Skeptics argued that somehow the information had been obtained through conventional means, though they struggled to explain how a young child in Ohio could have accessed such private and detailed knowledge about a man who had died before the child was even born. Believers in reincarnation saw James's case as one of the most well-documented examples of consciousness surviving death and carrying forward into a new life. Dr. Ian Stevenson's research at the University of Virginia had documented hundreds of similar cases worldwide, but few had been as thoroughly investigated or as emotionally compelling as James's story. As James continued to grow, The evidence of his connection to Michael Rodriguez became even more profound and disturbing. Child psychiatrists noted that his drawings evolved from simple sketches to detailed architectural renderings that accurately depicted the interior layout of the World Trade Center floors that had been destroyed. These weren't drawings that could be found in any textbook or online resource. They represented specific office configurations that had been unique to that particular floor and time period. Dr. Patricia Hamilton, a forensic psychologist brought in to evaluate the case, conducted extensive interviews with James over a period of 18 months. During one particularly intense session, James was able to describe the exact sequence of events that had unfolded on September 11th with a level of detail that matched classified FBI reports. He knew about the specific time intervals between the plane impacts, the locations where people had gathered to make their final phone calls, and even the conversations that had taken place among co-workers in those final moments. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of James's memories was his ability to describe the physical sensations Michael had experienced during those final hours. He would talk about the burning in his lungs from the smoke, the feeling of heat against his skin, and the overwhelming sense of helplessness as the building began to sway and crack around him. These weren't the imaginative stories of a child. They were the traumatic memories of a man who had lived through one of history's most devastating attacks. The Patterson family began working with a team of researchers from the Institute for Consciousness Studies, an organization dedicated to investigating cases of apparent reincarnation and past life memories. The team included Dr. Rebecca Morrison, a neurologist specializing in consciousness research, and Dr. Marcus Webb, a paranormal investigator with over 20 years of experience documenting supernatural phenomena. Their investigation revealed details that even hardened skeptics found difficult to dismiss. James was able to provide information about Michael Rodriguez's childhood that only family members could have known. He described the specific location of a scar on Michael's knee from a bicycle accident when he was 8 years old. He knew about Michael's first pet, a golden retriever named Charlie, and could accurately describe the layout of the house where Michael had grown up in Puerto Rico. When Dr. Morrison arranged for James to meet Michael's elderly mother, Carmen Rodriguez, the encounter provided some of the most compelling evidence yet. James immediately recognized Carmen and began speaking to her in Spanish, a language he had never been taught or exposed to. He used specific phrases and expressions that Carmen later confirmed were unique to their family and the region of Puerto Rico where Michael had been raised. During their conversation, James shared memories of family gatherings, traditional recipes that Carmen had taught Michael as a child, and even sang a lullaby in Spanish that Carmen had sung to Michael when he was small. The elderly woman broke down in tears, saying that no one outside the family knew that particular song, and that she had only sung it to Michael during his earliest childhood years. The case took an even more mysterious turn when James began experiencing what researchers termed anniversary reactions. Every year on September 11th, James would become withdrawn and depressed, often waking up from nightmares that seemed to intensify in the days leading up to the anniversary. These episodes would last for several days, during which James would refuse to eat, would draw disturbing images of falling people and burning buildings, and would repeat phrases like, "I can't breathe," and "the phone isn't working." Dr. Morrison documented these anniversary reactions over a period of 5 years, noting that they occurred without any external triggers or reminders about the significance of the date. James's parents had deliberately avoided discussing September 11th in their home, yet their son's psychological state would dramatically shift every year as the date approached, as if his soul was responding to some deep, cellular memory of trauma. The research team decided to conduct a controlled experiment when James turned 10 years old. They arranged for him to visit locations in New York City that had been significant to Michael Rodriguez, but without telling James where they were going or why. The results were both fascinating and deeply disturbing. When they took James to the church where Michael and Maria had been married, the boy immediately became emotional and walked directly to the exact pew where Michael's family had sat during the ceremony. He described details about the wedding that were later confirmed by family photographs. The color of Maria's dress, the flowers that had decorated the altar, and even the specific hymn that had been sung during the service. At Michael's favorite restaurant in Little Italy, James ordered the exact meal that Michael had always chosen, osso buco with a side of risotto, despite having never eaten Italian food before. The restaurant owner, who had known Michael for years, was so moved by James's behavior and mannerisms that he later told investigators, "It was like Michael had walked back into my restaurant. The way this boy held his fork, the way he asked for extra Parmesan cheese, even the way he laughed, it was identical." Perhaps the most compelling evidence came during James's visit to the local library, where Michael had spent countless hours studying for his financial certification exams. Without any guidance, James walked directly to the third floor, turned left down a specific corridor, and led the group to a secluded study area that had been Michael's favorite spot. He even sat in the exact chair that Michael had preferred, positioned at a table that offered a view of the Manhattan skyline. The librarians on duty that day were visibly shaken when James began describing how he used to come here to study for his big test, and how he liked this spot because he could see the tall buildings where he wanted to work someday. These were aspirations and habits that Michael had shared with very few people, yet a 10-year-old boy from Ohio was recounting them with perfect accuracy. As James entered his teenage years, the intensity of his Michael Rodriguez memories began to fade, which researchers noted was consistent with other documented cases of childhood reincarnation memories. Dr. Stevenson's research had shown that these types of memories typically diminish as children develop their own distinct personalities and life experiences. However, James retained certain skills and knowledge that seemed to have no explanation other than his connection to Michael's previous life. He continued to excel in mathematics and financial concepts, eventually pursuing a degree in economics, despite having no family background in business or finance. He also maintained his ability to speak basic Spanish, though he had never formally studied the language. Now, I want to know your opinion about everything we've explored today. What do you think about this incredible story of reincarnation and the possibility that consciousness can survive death? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll love reading and interacting with your perspectives. The case of James Patterson and Michael Rodriguez has become one of the most thoroughly documented examples of apparent reincarnation in modern history. The evidence collected over more than a decade includes hundreds of hours of recorded interviews, detailed psychological evaluations, verified historical records, and testimony from dozens of witnesses who knew Michael Rodriguez personally. What makes this case particularly compelling is not just the volume of evidence, but the emotional authenticity that James displayed throughout his childhood. The grief, trauma, and love that he expressed when discussing Michael's life and death seemed far too genuine and complex for a child to fabricate or imagine. The consistency of his memories over many years, combined with the specific and verifiable details he provided, created a body of evidence that even skeptical researchers found difficult to dismiss entirely. Dr. Vasquez, who worked with James for over 8 years, concluded in her final report that, while we cannot definitively prove that consciousness survives death and reincarnates, the James Patterson case presents evidence that challenges our fundamental understanding of human consciousness and the nature of personal identity. The possibility that some aspect of Michael Rodriguez's awareness, memory, and personality continued to exist after his physical death and somehow merged with or influenced the developing consciousness of James Patterson cannot be ruled out based on conventional scientific understanding. The implications of James's story extend far beyond the realm of paranormal research. If consciousness can indeed survive death and carry forward memories, emotions, and even skills into a new life, then our understanding of human existence, the nature of the soul, and the meaning of death itself must be completely reconsidered. Maria Rodriguez, Michael's widow, eventually came to accept James as carrying some essential part of her deceased husband. She developed a relationship with the Patterson family and served as a maternal figure in James's life, helping him understand and process the memories that had caused him so much distress during his early childhood. In her own words, Maria said, "I don't pretend to understand how this is possible, but I know that when I look into James's eyes, I see something of Michael looking back at me. Whether it's reincarnation, some kind of spiritual connection, or something else entirely, I believe that love transcends death, and that the bonds we form with others continue in ways we may never fully comprehend. The story of James Patterson and Michael Rodriguez forces us to confront questions that science has yet to answer. Is consciousness merely a product of brain activity that ceases at death? Or is it something more fundamental that can exist independently of physical form? Can the deepest aspects of who we are, our memories, our loves, our very essence, somehow persist beyond the grave and find expression in new lives? If you enjoyed this incredible story and want to see more content that explores the mysteries of life, death, and the supernatural, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like to show your support. Your engagement helps me bring more fascinating stories like this one to light. These questions may never receive definitive answers, but cases like James's remind us that the universe holds mysteries that challenge everything we think we know about the nature of existence itself. In a world where science continues to push the boundaries of understanding, perhaps the most profound discoveries lie not in distant galaxies or subatomic particles, but in the depths of human consciousness and the eternal questions of what happens when we die. Now I want to know your final thoughts. Do you believe that consciousness can survive death and reincarnate? Have you ever experienced something that made you question the boundaries between life and death? Leave your comments below. I love reading your perspectives and will respond to as many as possible.